from the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. In his first public statement following the failed coup, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro condemned and questioned the actions of traitor soldiers who were led by the opposition.
They placed at the height of the highway those machine guns, 4 machine guns. I ask myself, why? To shoot who? To fight? To kill who? Who they were planning to kill and shoot? The professionals of the armed forces, the professionals of the Bolivarian police department, the professionals of the National Guard, that by obligation, by conscience, following orders, they had to reestablish order, public order, and the rule of law in that specific place. Who were they thinking of killing?
President Maduro also accused opposition member Leopoldo López of being behind Tuesday's operation and previous attempts to topple the government.
Those protagonists, the same, that by 5-6 a.m. today, social media show the far-right opposition. We could see the face of a true murderer, a fascist, that's been there in the last 17 years of attempted and coups. Mr. Leopoldo López, who violated his house arrest and was personally directing, as you will see now, he was personally conducting the operation of this armed group that created this attempted coup at the Altamira highway at the east of Caracas.
The president also condemned opposition figure Juan Guaidó for what he says was his role in sponsoring the coup.
Then we saw the arrival of lawmaker Juan Guaidó, the self-proclaimed, sponsoring an attempted coup attempt against power, sponsoring with videos, making a call for arms, for thousands of people to support the coup. Something unique, something never seen in countries, in democratically elected countries around the world, never seen before.
President Maduro also announced that 80% of the soldiers involved in the attempted coup were tricked by the right-wing opposition.
And Venezuelan people know it, and 80% of the armed personnel there that were called upon that place at 3 a.m. at the Altamira highway were called upon by tricks and lies. They told them they were going to do an operation at the Tocorón jail. And when they saw Leopoldo López, when they saw Guaidó, they said, "What is this?" And no one was present there. There was no commander-in-chief.
Maduro also strongly denied allegations that he was ready to leave the country.
Mike Pompeo was saying, I ask myself, since seriousness lies, up to what point how far can they go? Pompeo said in the afternoon that he said Maduro had a plane ready to flee to Cuba. And the Russians told him to get out of the plane and did not allow him to go. Mr. Pompeo, please, be serious. Mr. Bolton also was ordering high-ranking officials in Venezuela to add themselves to the coup that was defeated. And Mr. Trump was exploding in lies. I asked myself, where are you? How far are you going to reach?
And the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has banned low flights over Venezuela's airspace. The FAA also gave any U.S. operators in Venezuela 48 hours to depart via the most expeditious possible route, citing increasing tensions. Now let's sum up what happened in Venezuela on Tuesday. From early in the morning, the government faced an attempted coup d'etat by Juan Guaidó and other opposition members, accompanied by a small group of National Guard soldiers. Many international media reported that they had taken control of the La Carlota air base in the east of Caracas, but that was never true. The revolt was confined to a part of the highway that runs past the base. And some of the opposition supporters did tear down a fence at the base, but loyal soldiers urged the opposition demonstrators to be calm and stay on the other side of the road, ensuring that the situation didn't escalate further. Government forces are under orders not to fire on opposition demonstrators.
No está permitido. Refiérense y listo.
Thousands of Venezuelans responded to a call to head to Miraflores Presidential Palace to defend the Bolivarian Revolution. There was a jubilant mood as the failure of the coup became clear. One opposition leader, Leopoldo López, has taken refuge in the Spanish embassy, and a number of opposition soldiers sought protection from the Brazilian embassy. People around the world are commemorating International Workers' Day with marches and rallies. The day originated in the United States in the 19th century when the labor union movement rose up against unjust working conditions and demanded better pay, reasonable hours, and paid leave. Thousands gathered in Cuba since 5 in the morning to take part in a traditional May Day march in Havana and Santiago de Cuba. Children, students, and workers from around the world are commemorating the achievements for workers in one of the most important events of the Cuban Revolution. President Miguel Díaz-Canel and Raúl Castro attended the celebration. Let's hear late leader Fidel Castro addressing the crowd during the year 2000 May 1st celebrations.
Revolution is the most important in a historic moment. It means to change everything that needs to be changed. It's equality and complete freedom, to be treated and to treat others as human beings, to empower ourselves with our own efforts to defy powerful forces inside and outside. It means to defend values we believe in and to pay the price of any sacrifice. It's modesty, selflessness, altruism, solidarity, and heroism. It's to fight with audacity, intelligence, not to lie or violate our ethical principles. It's a deep conviction that there's no force in the world that can destroy the strength of the truth and the ideas. Revolution is unity, independence, fighting for just dreams for Cuba and the world, which is the basis of our patriotism, socialism, and internationalism.
Meanwhile, in Russia, a May Day parade took place in Moscow's iconic Red Square. Over 100,000 workers carrying flags and placards participated in this colorful march. Parades to mark the day were also held in other cities across the country. In South Africa, workers under the country's largest workers' federation, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, celebrated their day in the city of Claremont. The event was led by President Cyril Ramaphosa, who reaffirmed his government's commitment to improving the working conditions in the country. Ramaphosa said the recent raise of the minimum wage is a positive action to improve the welfare of workers. Hundreds of protesters have gathered in several cities in France amid heavy police presence. Yellow Vest protesters joined thousands of workers to take part in May Day marches organized by trade unions. The Interior Ministry said it will deploy more than 7,000 police officers across Paris to avoid what they call destructive behavior by protesters.
There is real discontent in this country, and it will be expressed today and in the coming days, and it's being expressed for 5 months. Those who said that protests don't make any difference, that there wasn't any anger left in the country, have been forced to realize that there is unhappiness in the country.
More stories coming up. Don't go away.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get your body. Tuesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Thousands of workers in Argentina have taken to the streets to protest against President Mauricio Macri's policies. The protests partially paralyzed government offices, schools, banks and airports as opposition to Macri's austerity policies, which the unions say are hurting the country's poor. The policies include raising taxes and cutting subsidies, leading to a sharp drop in Macri's popularity, according to opinion polls.
Officials do not understand anything. They do not feel anything. They do not go out in the street. They live in another reality, and the reality of the workers is hunger, dismissal, and threats.
Police in Honduras have clashed with hundreds of people who were protesting against proposed education and healthcare reforms. According to health authorities, at least 3 people were injured. Many fear that the proposed reforms will lead to privatization and job losses in both sectors. Teachers and health workers' unions have vowed to maintain pressure on the government until the proposals are withdrawn.
The 2 projects that were harmful to the interests of the people have already been eliminated. Now the biggest goal is to get President Juan Orlando Hernandez out, to take out the dictator.
The gap between the rich and the poor remains stubbornly high in Panama, with over a quarter of its citizens living in poverty. In the lead-up to the May 5th general elections, politicians are vowing to tackle these inequalities. But many voters fear that without a popular alternative in power, this will be impossible.
While the economic improvements of the last decade may have contributed to poverty reduction, they still haven't benefited all groups in Panama equally. The World Bank ranks Panama as the 10th most unequal country in the world.
This is a country that has great and steady economic growth, but it is held back by neoliberal politics that concentrates wealth into just a few hands.
The Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, reveals that public spending as a share of Panama's GDP was just 7.4%. The government only invests 3% of GDP in education and has a housing deficit of 150,000 homes. Also, more than a quarter of the population doesn't have access to health services. 5% doesn't have access to clean water. 11% are malnourished, and 19% don't have an adequate diet. As for labor, more than 40% are informal workers, and among those who have a formal job, more than half of them don't earn minimum wage.
We always need to improve these types of programs because it is impossible to sustain a country that doesn't even ensure that basic services are delivered to the people. And these are programs that don't even come from our government, but from international institutions.
The current government has failed to make good on its promises to alleviate poverty, such as through the provision of housing.
We are not supporting the ruling party. They do not care if we live under palm leaves. They do not care about that.
Most candidates, except those from the Social Movement Party, suggest that they will maintain the current economic model.
I think the existing economic policies will not change. All the candidates have made that clear. This means that the people should not expect to see any changes, but economic reform is needed if we are to have the type of country we want.
Panama may have experienced 6% economic growth last year. However, this healthy growth trend contrasts sharply with a social panorama of poverty and unequal income distribution. There are still enormous problems of social inequality to overcome.
Guyana's government is defending its decision to honor a former legislator who died in a U.S. jail after being convicted of terrorism charges. The National Assembly passed a resolution paying tribute to former legislator Abdul Qadir, who died in June last year. But the U.S. Embassy issued a statement condemning the move. In response, the government said it was custom and had no intention of glorifying a convicted terrorist. Qadir was sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of plotting a 2007 terror attack at the JFK airport in New York. A state of public emergency has been declared in western Jamaica in the parishes of St. James, Hanover, and Westmoreland, amid an increase of violent crimes. Murders are up almost 50% over the same period last year.
After careful consideration and review of the crime statistics, in particular violent crimes which have been committed in some western parishes, the security forces have advised that the situation now currently exists would warrant the government advising the Governor General to proclaim a state of public emergency.
The government of Antigua and Barbuda is insisting that a university campus will be opened there in September, whether or not it is affiliated with the University of the West Indies. Prime Minister Gaston Brown made the announcement, saying that several Caribbean countries are now raising concerns regarding the opening of the campus. There are 3 UWI campuses in Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados. Liat is staying in the air in spite of financial challenges. The commitment is coming from the regional airline's chief executive officer, who says they would push to continue their daily operating schedules. The carrier had operated all its flights over the peak Easter season with an on-time performance of 80%. CEO Julie Rayford-Jones says that the airline was looking forward to a summer period with festivals and events across the region. She added there were discussions on the need for all the territories served by Liat to contribute financially. Meanwhile, St. Kitts and Nevis says it will provide $370,000 in emergency funding for Liat. The airline needs roughly $5.5 million to stay afloat. Shareholder governments ended a meeting on Tuesday agreeing to give further consideration to a proposal by Antigua's Prime Minister regarding the future of the Antigua-based airline. CARICOM's Secretary General has called on regional heads to push ahead with the full implementation of the long overdue Caribbean single market and economy. He was at the time delivering remarks on the opening of the 48th meeting of the Council for Trade and Economic Development in Guyana.
We cannot come to meetings after meeting after meeting, agree on a plan. The plan is now published on our website for all to see, and we're not making progress without even giving reasons why we're not making progress. So I repeat, implementation cannot be a shift in target. We have to report to our heads of government. Our leaders have taken the decision based on the advice that has come from the COTEL.
We're taking one last break, but stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your green zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been sentenced to 50 weeks, about 11 months, in jail for breaching his bail conditions. Assange was found guilty for skipping bail in 2012 as he took refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. His lawyer told the court his client was gripped by fears of redemption to the US because of the publication WikiLeaks led. Assange read a letter in court saying that over the years he found himself, quote, struggling with difficult circumstances. Thousands of Algerian students have marched through the capital for a 10th consecutive week, calling for the overthrow of the system. Protesters are calling for the allies of former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika to leave. Meanwhile, the army chief has vowed a widening investigation into Bouteflika's circle of power.
We are sending a message to the Algerian people that we have to continue the revolution. We must not stop here, because if we stop, it will be as if we had done nothing, as if we had not protested for 10 Fridays. The system is mocking us. We have done nothing yet. We shouldn't change the people. We should change the system completely.
Sudan's top military general said the head of the military council has been chosen to lead the new joint civilian military council when it's formed. On Monday, some leaders of the opposition agreed to form a joint council with the military. However, the decision has not been well received by all sectors of the opposition. Members of the opposition who are against the joint council claim that this is a copycat of the former government. And protesters have opposed the decision by the military to remove the barricades set up in front of the military headquarters, saying this decision is an attempt to break up their sitting. Demonstrators vowed that the barricades will not be removed until their demands for a civilian government are met.
We have lasted 21 days and will stay more. Our demands must be met. Omar al-Bashir and his followers must be made accountable. Our rights must be restored.
New lawsuits have been filed against Boeing in the US by families of passengers who lost their lives in the Ethiopian Airlines crash back in March. The two plaintiffs lost several close family members in the March 10th crash, which led to the grounding of the Boeing MAX jets by a number of countries. The new lawsuits join a string of others which were filed against the US company in the aftermath of the crashes.
Why were the 737 MAX 8 planes not grounded and not immediately investigated right after the Lions aircraft? If something would have been done after the first crash, which just occurred just a few months ago, this might have been prevented. I could have my family back from the vacations sharing the stories.
Japan's emperor has officially announced his abdication from the Japanese throne. The elaborate abdication ritual began at a Shinto shrine on Tuesday morning as Japan embraced the end of his reign with reminiscence and hope for a new era. The ritual marks the official handover of the throne by the emperor to his son Naruhito, who will officially become emperor at midnight. In his speech, the emperor said he had served his people with a deep sense of trust and respect.
It is fortunate that I have been able to perform my duty as emperor with profound trust and respect for the Japanese people for 30 years since my ascension to the throne. To the people who accepted and supported me as a symbol, my heartfelt thanks. Together with the Empress, I hope from my heart that the new imperial era that begins tomorrow will be peaceful and fruitful, and pray for the peace and happiness of our country and the people of the world.
Meanwhile, thousands of people gather at the palace grounds to witness the historical location. People have expressed gratitude to the emperor for serving the people of Japan diligently and for bringing the monarch closer to the people.
I heard that at the last transition, the mood was gloomy, as they were in mourning. So I think it's a good thing that we can mark this transition as if it were a festival and celebrate and enjoy it.
With that, we end our news brief, but you can read more on these stories by checking our website, telesurenglish.net. And be also sure to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.